Hi everyone, Danielle Pettiford here with Couples Academy. This show is all about how the Enneagram can help transform your relationships and your life. And today I want to talk about the different communication styles based on your Enneagram. You don't want to miss this.
She's on her way, on her way, on her way. Polishing, refining, reshape, reshape. In the heart, you wait, don't hesitate. Here we go.
Different personalities mean different communication styles, and nowhere is this more apparent than between a husband and a wife. Conflicting communication styles between a couple, whether it's about remembering to throw in an extra load of laundry or whether it's about forgetting to take out the garbage, ultimately means that we fail to ever really hear the heart of the matter. Why is that? It's because there are always two conflicts going on at the exact same time. Our external conflict, that which actually just happened, and then our internal conflict, and that's how we feel about what just happened. And our internal conflict often takes center stage before we know it due to something that was said. But it's not necessarily what was said, it's how we felt about what was said, right? And oftentimes our internal conflicts cause us to feel some level of shame and fear. Sometimes we feel guilt, right? Sometimes we feel angry. Think about it in your own relationships. How often do you find it difficult to speak to your spouse about issues for fear of stepping on an emotional landmine, right? And you might feel like you're never on the same page with the issues, or that whatever it is that you came to the table to discuss never actually gets addressed. Conflicting communication styles can cause frustrations and keep us from ever resolving issues. So understanding that your spouse is different is fundamental. And this is why it's important to understand your own personality style as well as your spouse's. If people knew themselves better, they could understand how they prefer to communicate. And if they knew their own spouse better, they could talk to them with more effectiveness and develop better communication skills and more intimacy. So, what can the Enneagram tell us about how we prefer to communicate? A whole lot. Let's get into it. All right, let's talk about Enneagram Type 1, okay? The way that they see themselves is upright, good. They know best. They're the perfectionist. Ones have the biggest inner critic out of all the personality styles. They're always second guessing their own decisions or calling themselves up to a higher standard, right? Nobody would know that they have the big inner critic because they seem to always be perfecting and fixing others. They tend to have inside knowledge on all the things that need to be fixed and what needs to be done differently. And their energy, let's talk about their energy. They can be upright and stiff, contained. They can seem like just solid, like they can seem emotionless when they're dictating to others what needs to be fixed. And ones are considered the perfectionist or the reformer. And so it's almost like their assignment in the world is to correct what's wrong. And they tend to have this ability to see all the things that need to be corrected that are wrong. And so it's not that they actually are these stern, stiff people. They can come across that way. Think of it like if it's somebody's job to do the checks and balances or quality assurance, right? They're about their business. And so they're observing an issue and they have to see to it that it's fixed. And so when it comes to their interpersonal relationships, like I said, ones actually want the best for themselves. They feel that they need to strive for perfection, but they also want to see perfection in others. And so as it relates to their interpersonal relationships, that might look like them seeing potential in you and wanting to raise you up to the highest level of potential and becoming frustrated when you don't show up that way. And so their conflict style, when they get into conflict and they're not seeing that people are rising to the occasion, so to speak, right? They can become fault finding, right? They can show up as nitpicking and complaining. They can show up as unemotional, and they're very emotional, right? But they're showing up as unemotional because at the end of the day, what we're focusing on is what you're not doing and you could be doing, or rather, you should be doing this. And it can become explosive. So they can show up as angry. Remember, they're in the gut triad, right? So that means that they are angry, right? But it's internalized anger. Ultimately, the one that they want to see the most perfection out of is themselves. Ones can also show up as being moralizing, right? And that can be tough for some people because, of course, no one's perfect, right? But the moralizer is going to point out the faults and flaws and the sins of people. They tend to be triggered when somebody tells them that they did something wrong, right? Or that they were wrong, right? So not just that they did something wrong, but you are actually wrong, really is triggering to the one because it kind of just mirrors their own self-talk. Some ones may actually retreat when they get into conflict because they don't want to show up as overly emotional. And so they will just retract themselves, pull away, or disconnect from the conversation altogether. And they do this because they don't want you to see their weakness. They want to show up as tough and certain, right? They are right. They know the right way. And so they don't want you to see their emotionalism, and they don't want you to see them crack, so to speak. And so they will disconnect. And sometimes when they do that, it shows up as just cold and distant. But people are misunderstanding really what's behind the heart and the mind of the one. Cold and distant. But people are misunderstanding really what's behind the heart and the mind of the one. If you want to get through to your one, here are a couple of clues on what you can do to communicate more effectively with your personality style one. Don't tell them that they're wrong, but rather find a way you can validate their opinion while holding your ground. Try to avoid words like incorrect, wrong, or bad altogether while in an argument because it will escalate the argument with your one. Help them see ways in which they are being angry or hurtful, but you do this in a gentle way as ones have a fear of their own anger and of just essentially being wrong. Remember, they have a very loud inner critic, and you don't want to be a second inner critic or external critic. It's really tough on them. So we just have to be gentle and understand our one's plight and figure out ways to communicate that with them where they understand your point of view and you understand theirs so that the communication continues to flow. Enneagram type 2. Enneagram type 2s see themselves as helpful, caring, loving, connecting. They see themselves as the person that is willing to be there and support people at any time for any need. They are very self-sacrificing. Where 2s get themselves into trouble is that they tend to over-sacrifice and overplay their importance in the lives of others. And when they get to that point, and they feel or experience any pushback from others, it really affects them tremendously because they truly are very giving and loving and supportive people. They wear their hearts on their sleeves. Remember, they're in the feeling triad. So they really do live in their feelings and their emotions. And the sacrifices that they make them feel loved. And so it's important for you to understand that when you see your 2 pushing in, kind of asserting themselves into your world. Their energy, though, the way that you experience them is going to be very soft on the outside, super sensitive, emotional, relational. They tend to have no problem crying with you. They feel your emotion. They can be wet depending on the situation, if they're going through some things in life and they're feeling unheard, or, if they're not in a healthy place, that connecting emotional behavior can take a turn, right? And it becomes more sulking. They tend to be martyrs, right? They're the type of person that will fall on the sword. And when they get to that place where they're falling on the sword for you, they're wanting that acknowledgement. They're wanting to know that they matter in your life. They're wanting to feel that they're important and they have a high importance in your world. When they don't feel that way, they can tend to become highly explosive, highly emotional, blistery, and wet. That anger comes out. Yes, they're in the feeling triad and they're the sensitive, loving ones, But when they don't feel that that love is being reciprocated, seen, or appreciated, because also remember, the feeling folks, the 2s, 3s, and 4s, they need to be seen as loving. And if you're not seeing them as loving, they really can become very frustrated and very angry. If you want to get through to your 2, here are some conflict style tips that can help you out. Conflict resolution tips for type 2. Assure the 2 that you appreciate their efforts and that they are not in vain, but remind them that they chose to do whatever it is that they are doing. Remind the 2 that you want them to take care of themselves, because typically their anger stems from the misdirected feeling of having to care for others. Acknowledge their emotional displays, but don't pay too much attention to their emotional outbursts. Enneagram type 3. So Enneagram type 3 see themselves as impressive. They are a winner. They are successful. They are the champion. They have a concept in their mind that says winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. And they mean that. They tend to be super successful at everything that they do. They will present themselves as popular and accomplished, and they do this intentionally. They tend to really put a lot of weight on how they are being seen by others, right? And so even though 3s are in the heart triad, it's more so about how others feel about them than how they feel, right? So they get caught up in the exterior of my success and my accomplishments. The energy, though, is interesting with 3s because it can be tough. They can have a tough exterior, a very intimidating exterior oftentimes, but they can also seem hollow and steely, right? Sometimes they can feel like connecting, emotionally connected, and then the next minute they seem emotionally detached. And so it can be confusing. And this is why we call our 3s the chameleons. Well, deep down inside, they're definitely there, and they definitely have a feeling. They need to feel a sense of a success and accomplish, and they need that feeling to come from others, right? But when you get up close in person, sometimes you're not feeling the connection that you think you would have based on the persona that's being put out. Communication style with Enneagram type 3 is very expedient and professional and polished, right? They know how to show up for success. That's why they're so successful. But they tend to do a lot of peacocking and bragging. They tend to be smooth and trendy, a smooth operator, and can talk, very charming and competent. But they love to lead too. So they're great mentors, and they like to pull people up, right? So they are good at motivating people to accomplish their highest goals as well, which is their highest priority, is achievement and success. And so they're really good at helping others to achieve success as well. Enneagram 3's conflict style is tricky. They tend to be incredibly evasive, and they are masters at it, but they're not necessarily aware of it, right? And so they might avoid serious issues, or if you point out something, they might not see it, or might find ways to shape it, or to, make it seem like it's something else. They are good at like changing hands when it comes to issues. And that stems from the fact that they seem to only be able to tolerate the successful side of things, not the unsuccessful side of things. So it's really challenging for your 3 when you have to confront them on things that they're not great at, because they're used to being great at everything. If you're not careful, your 3 will become really angry with you when they feel that their success or their attempt for success has been undermined or misunderstood. So here are some conflict resolution tips for your Enneagram 3. Try to set aside a predetermined amount of time to discuss problems. Don't allow them to smooth things over with promises or apologies if they don't understand the situation. If in an interpersonal relationship with them, try to appreciate the hard work they put in, but emphasize the importance of the relationship. Help them feel comfortable with expressing feelings rather than just facts, as this is a method they utilize to prevent feeling too much. Enneagram type 4. Enneagram type 4 sees themselves as deep, different, intuitive, knowledgeable, creative, They also see themselves as correct. They see themselves as like the missing piece to some kind of puzzle. They just got to find the puzzle, right? Right? I know that my fours will really resonate with that. That was a good one. Fours want to be seen as special and creative, right? They want to know that they fit, like I said, like a puzzle in this place, and that without them something would be missing. That tells them that this is how God designed them to be, and they're where they're supposed to be. Because fours are always seeking, where am I supposed to be? What is my significance in the world, right? And so it's really important for them to feel like they fit where they're at. Enneagram energy is really interesting to me. It's very fluid and flowing. They tend to be super poised and sensitive. They're very intense, emotionally charged, but they can also be very melancholy in their disposition. Oftentimes you don't know what's wrong with the four, and there's absolutely nothing wrong, right? They might just be in a seat of observation or self-questioning. And a lot of times it's self-questioning, right? But you might perceive something's wrong, or they're not okay, or there's some issue. And really they're just trying to figure out, okay, what do I need to do? Do I fit in this place? Should I say something? Should I not say something? Should I do something? Should I not do something? Because fours tend to be very questioning about every move that they make. Their communication style is interesting because they can be haughty or seem haughty, right? But they're not necessarily haughty. They can tend to show up as dramatic, and they can overemphasize symbolism. They can speak metaphorically because fours tend to be very deep, right? You want to lean in to what your four is saying, because sometimes the four comes off of their mind with something and you're just like, wow, like that was so deep, right? But because they don't speak specifically all the time about things, you can get a little confused as to what direction they're going in or what did they mean. Their conflict style can be sometimes condescending. And that's because, remember, 2s, 3s, and 4s also in the heart triad. So at the root of it, there's a lot of shame already there. So they're dealing with their own shame. And so to overcome that, when they get into conflict, they can show up as a little haughty, condescending. They can be emotionally explosive, like out of nowhere, just hot, and you're just like, whoa, where'd this come from? And it's because the 4 is internalizing what you're saying. And they may not be seeing what you're saying subjectively, right? It's actually an attack to the 4, and 4 has to kind of sit back and take it in and process it. And sometimes they just process it with reaction. 4s, when they're triggered, they can feel misunderstood, and this can make them really angry. They can feel that people are abandoning them, and you really need to take the time to nurture and understand the heart of the 4 so that you can be productive in your communication style with them. So here are some conflict resolution tips for your 4. Conflict resolution tips for type 4. Don't try to have a completely rational discussion devoid of emotional content. It won't engage them at all. 4s are drawn to the heart of the matter. You have to capture their mind. Once you capture their mind, you've got them. Try to recognize their intuitive insight while still maintaining your own personal truth. Okay? 4s like to tell other people what they are feeling. Make sure that you correct that. Let them know, no, that's your feelings. Here are my feelings, okay? But don't let their emotional outbursts drive you away. Take the time out if necessary so that emotions can calm down. Let them know if you've been hurt too. They want to connect with you on that level. They want to know that you have feelings and that you have emotions, okay? You have to understand that with your 4, your feelings are just as important as their feelings. And so if you're willing to open up and go deep with your 4, you are going to get so much further in your communication than if you go to the facts and the details and what actually happened. You really want to go to the heart of the matter with your type 4. Enneagram type 5 sees themselves as knowledgeable, the thinker. They know more than others. They need more time and space, solitude, right? They need to think. I'm a thinker. And they also see themselves as set apart from others. And that's important for you to understand about your Enneagram type 5, because upon first glance, they can seem off-putting, not communicative, right? They are very comfortable sitting in a room and not saying a word to anyone. And it can sometimes make people feel uncomfortable that this person is just staring and not communicating. And they really, it's interesting because you could actually ask them a direct question and they won't respond. And they feel very comfortable, but you feel uncomfortable. And so you have to understand that they actually need time. They are process oriented. Fives want to be seen as intelligent, rational, right? They don't want to seem incompetent. That's a big deal for fives. And so oftentimes, to avoid that feeling of incompetence, they will withhold and they won't say anything until there's something that they have to say. And usually when they do say something, it is profound because they are the thinkers and they are the researchers and they do know their way around whatever it is that they've mastered, because competency is key for fives. Their energy, though, can be prickly and detached, almost like they're disembodied, right? They can be contained and very mental or cerebral. Like, you know, like you can ask them a question and they're going to the brain and they're really processing it out and thinking it out. But this tends to make people feel that they're removed and disconnected and remote, okay? The communication style tends to be technical, knowledgeable, unemotional, like these are the facts, this is what it is, it's this, that, and the third, you know, because they're getting to the point, right? There's not a lot of emotion connected to the conversation. It's really the facts, and the facts coming through crystal clear and with a certain level of clarity and sophistication and experience, expertise. That's the word I'm going for. The conflict style, this is a big one. You're seeing this in your Enneagram 5. Detached, right? In the midst of an emotional argument where you should be feeling something, your 5 tends to be detached and cold. You know, they can tend to be cutting and dispassionate. They can even act childlike, like just sulk and sit back and not even verbalize a word, you know, just fold their hands and just begin to sulk. They also can be very passive aggressive and arrogant, and overly logical. That's a good one. I didn't want to forget that note. Overly logical, right? And so if we're in an emotional conversation and you're talking about the logic of it and the facts of it, sometimes you're missing the big picture, right? So it's almost like only facts, leaving out all emotions. And here's the kicker with your 5s. They really resist emotional expectations placed upon them, right? And so you will, if you want to trigger your 5, begin to put the weight of emotional expectations on them, right? Needing to have long, drawn out emotional conversations with your 5 till we get to the heart of the matter will completely drain to the level of depletion your Enneagram 5, okay? So if you want to know how to get through to your Enneagram type 5, here are a few tips for conflict resolution. Conflict resolution tips for type 5. Try to maintain some emotional stability while arguing. 5s like to keep to the facts of a situation and will detach when emotions get too heated. Walk away from the argument if you are too emotional, as you will be unlikely to get a response. Tell them that your feelings are hurt without expecting them to do something about it. They become angry when there are emotional expectations. Don't let them use knowledge or arrogance as a weapon, and remind them you are a person, not a robot or a computer. And that's a big one, guys, because it's a defense mechanism for 5. Understand that the 5 does need connection. They really do, but they need it on their terms, and they need it in smaller quantities than most people. They actually are very autonomous people. And so you want to make sure that you let them know, listen, I know that you don't need that much emotion, but I'm a human being and I need some emotion so that you can find your balance. But if you just try your best to make sure that there is some logic involved in your emotional conversations, you're going to get a lot further with your personality style 5. Enneagram personality style type 6. They see themselves as clever, as loyal. They're the type of person that when you make a friend with a 6, you make a friend for life unless you cross them. Do not cross them. But they see themselves as harmless, right? And they know that they are real. They will tell you, every day, I keep it real. I'm real. I don't know any other way to be but to be real. 6s want to be seen as responsible and clever and also loyal. And they may cover feelings of insecurity with ingratiating niceness or sweetness or rebellious provocativeness. Okay? Mentally active. They're always thinking and over processing. They're checking the list and they're checking the list twice. They're about security and having boundaries and perimeters. It's often said that 6s' fences have fences, right? Because they're going to make sure that there's safety and there's checks and balances involved in things. And that's because they have an inner sense that people could potentially betray. Even though they require loyalty, and need to be loyal, they tend to attract situations due to their perspective and their outlook where they feel that someone has betrayed. And oftentimes, 6s don't take the time to ask the questions to find out what actually happened. And so you betrayed, you're cut, and conversations are never had. And so oftentimes you'll find that a lot of 6s have a lot of broken relationships because of the conflict style. The conflict style is very defensive and protecting in nature. Enneagram type 6's energy tends to be high energy, hyper vigilant. They tend to be anxious and suspicious, and a little bit high strung. They are also incredibly funny. They have a great sense of humor, and not a lot of people are aware of it. They like to engage in conversation, especially when they can let their hair down and relax with somebody that they feel safe with, and that they feel that they can trust. But they also can be very rebellious and provocative, especially counterphobic 6s, which will rebel against authority. They feel a need to rebel against authority in order to protect and be safe. And so if you're a counterphobic 6, you're probably more rebellious than the others. Conflict style for type 6 is vacillating and blaming. They tend to victimize themselves. They're highly distrusting. They will cross-examine. And the reason for this is because they want to ensure that you are who you say you are. They want to double check that the last thing that you said it again, and that there's no inconsistencies in it, right? They tend to be questioning, almost interrogating, to the point of interrogating, right? To get to the truth. They call it Socratic questioning, where I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of perimeter questions so that I can get to the interior core motive question, right? And so ultimately they want you to expose yourself before you expose yourself to them in a way that betrays them or crosses or breaks their trust. 6s tend to feel a tremendous amount of anxiety about being abandoned. And so if you want to get through to your Enneagram style 6, there's a way that you need to have these conversations to ensure that even though you may not be happy about something that you're about to bring to them to discuss, whatever the conflict is, that you are still highly committed to them, that you are loyal to them, that they have your support. So if you want to get through to your Enneagram personality style type 6, here are some tips to help you out. Conflict resolution tips for type 6. Admit any ulterior motives. Try to stay calm, but don't dismiss them. Find common ground and ally their fears of abandonment or anger. Do not get lost in their arguing circles. If it feels like a marathon, walk away. Hold your opinion, but don't be stubborn about seeing their point of view. Do not insult their intelligence or flatter or appease them. Don't try to win. This will only escalate the argument. Don't tell a 6 to calm down. You do not want to do that, right? So be completely transparent with your 6. Odds are they're sitting there looking at you like this, waiting for you to crumble under the pressure. So what you want to do is be completely transparent with your 6, because they can't handle dishonesty, and they need to know that they can trust you and trust your word. Enneagram type 7. Enneagram see themselves as free. I am free. I am exciting. I'm entertaining. Enneagram 7 wants it all, and they are positive, okay? So 7s want to be seen as interesting and entertaining and fun, okay? We don't like being held down by heavy, weighty, problematic situations. We're always looking for the lighter side. We're always looking at the glass as half full, not half empty. Now, you got to be careful because your Enneagram type 7 is fear-based, right? In the head triads, 5, 6s, and 7. And so they might cover up feelings of inferiority or of boredom by trying to plan something big or exciting or with stories. So you have to really be careful about your Enneagram type 7 because they don't like to acknowledge problems at all. We don't like to acknowledge problems at all. And so you really have to zone in and tune in to your Enneagram type 7. The energy, you guessed it, amped up, restless, airy and light, quick, sprightly, and mischievous sometimes, right? We're fast, we talk fast, we move fast. The communication style is high energy, fun-loving, entertaining, storytelling. We love to tell stories. Enthusiastic, and exaggerated hand movements, and we're always moving. Conflict style. This is where you're going to get into the nuts and bolts of it. This is where you're really going to need to understand your Enneagram type 7 because it can be fleeing. 7s don't like conflict. 7s just want to have fun, right? Like Cyndi Lauper, right? So they can seem very disinterested, also condescending, can show up as arrogant and unaffected by the conflict, even though it's real. And the 7 is very much connected to the conflict and feeling it, maybe feeling fear or feeling some type of lack of security in the argument. But at the end of the day, 7s are triggered by this feeling of being trapped or limited in pain. And so because of that, 7s try to flee. We want to get away from that situation. So it's really about how you approach your 7. So because you know that your 7 is an escapist, a master escapist, able to get away from anything that feels negative or painful. How? By brightening it up, changing the subject, and making it lighthearted, seeing, blue skies or looking forward to something new tomorrow. You're going to have to learn how to ground your 7 to deal with weighty issues. So if you're ready for tips on how to get through to your 7, here we go. Conflict resolution tips for type 7. Try to allow them their space, but hold them to a time when the conflict can be resolved. 7s will flee at difficulty and let them know how this affects your relationship. If they try to leave, ask them to set aside time for you to discuss it. 5s like this too. Don't harp too much on what they're doing wrong or they'll shut down. Don't sugarcoat things, but try to reframe things so that they can take in the information without feeling too threatened. Enneagram type 8s, they see themselves as strong. They are the survivor. They are in charge. They protect, okay? 8s see themselves as strong and in charge. They want others to recognize their strengths as well. And they are the type of person that will protect and challenge where necessary, okay? I always say this. If there's any issue going on and nobody knows what to do, the 8 is there and coming to the rescue. They know what to do. And even if they don't know what to do, because they're the type of person to take charge and make it happen, they're going to make a decision and do something, right? So that's your Enneagram 8. They are not afraid of conflict and of showing just how bold and angry they are, okay? But their energy is interesting because it can come off as strong and solid and intimidating and big, right? Very matter of fact and brash, right? Just like straight to the point, no chaser, right? And very empowering. 8s need to learn to soften a little bit because 8s can be tremendously intimidating. They can intimidate certain types. And so, they could run certain types away and the type would never ever confront them or tell them how they're feeling because they feel so intimidated by the 8's energy. Their conflict style is blistery, domineering, and violent. They can break things. They can also show up as unemotional and dismissive, uncaring and rageful, vengeful as well. And what triggers your eights is a feeling controlled or dominated. They don't like being under someone else's control. They don't like not being the one to call the shots. And interestingly, they will always in a room find who the people are who are in control and either align with those people or dominate those people because they like to be the ones in charge. Your eights might become domineering and aggressive and cold when they feel triggered. But you have to understand something about your eight. Your eight, yeah, they are the strong ones and they are in the gut and anger center. But the reason for that anger is that that eight was a very loving, hurt person. And that person was not protected. And so eight had to decide to protect themselves. And so if you understand your eight's personality and the root and the heart of the matter of your eight, knowing that this is a loving, soft person that's hiding behind a big, thick, mean, protective shell, then you can learn some finesse on how to get through to your eight. So if you're ready for some tips on how to communicate with your personality style eight, here we go. Conflict resolution tips for type 8. Stand your ground and do not waver in your opinion. They want someone who can hold their own ground against them. Eights will spar with people they love and test their strength. Try and set ground rules in an argument with an eight and don't be afraid to let them know if they hurt your feelings. This often surprises them. Try not to react to their intimidation tactics, but don't egg them on either. It's interesting that eights enjoy a good argument. And out of all the Enneagram types, eights are the type that can handle your throws and your blows. They're the most honest, the most transparent, and they can handle it. So be completely transparent with them and hold your own, hold your ground, stand your ground. They can handle it. Enneagram type 9 sees themselves as peaceful, easygoing, calm, drama-free, uncomplicated. Nines want to be seen as easygoing and peaceful. Okay, they don't like ruffling feathers. They like connecting with people, but they might hide negative feelings about situations and sweep them under the rug to cover up feelings of anxiety and anger. Because at the end of the day, they allow a lot of things to take place, but don't acknowledge the hurt or feeling because they want to keep the peace and because connection with people is highly important to them. And so this is something that you really want to look out for with your Enneagram personality style 9 if they're becoming passive aggressive. If you start to see passive aggressive behavior, you know that there's a conflict issue going on. Their energy though shows up as very peaceful and grounded, but they can be spacey when it comes to hard things. Like, you know, they don't like being pressured or questioned or forced to deal with an obvious crisis or issue. Right? You know, if you have friends and they want to say, hey, do you see what happened here? Why you're letting this happen? That really might cause them a lot of anxiety and frustration, and they might space out on you or detach. They tend to be sleepy and slow to deal with things and show up as vacant when real issues are taking place that they don't want to deal with. And they tend to show up as a doormat sometimes because they just allow people to walk all over them because they just don't want to disturb the peace. The flip side of that, because they're a peacemaker, their communication style tends to show up as agreeable, right, and complacent. But when they get frustrated and they have allowed too many things to take place without dealing with it, because it's there, it's just kind of in the background, boiling over, like, you know, it's getting to it's a simmer and then it's getting to a boil over, they can become passive aggressive, right? And you'll start to see that passive aggressiveness show up in different ways. They can become non-committal, stubborn, you know, agree to do something but just not show up and you don't know where they went. It could show up that way. So you got to really understand your Enneagram type 9 so that you don't mistakenly take advantage of them, because the heart of who they are is good, right? They want to do good things. They want to be a peacemaker. They want to have connection with people. They don't like to ruffle feathers or to get into conflict. But what ends up happening is that they tend to attract people that take advantage, right? That kind of behavior attracts people who like taking advantage of and pouncing on the 9. So if you're with an Enneagram Personality Style 9, you might need to learn some communication styles on how to not only protect them from others, but how do you connect with them in a way? How do you start to observe and identify issues with them when they're not dealing with conflict well, so that you can communicate with them and get through to the heart of the matter? So if you're ready for your tips for Enneagram Personality Type 9, here you go. Conflict resolution tips with Type 9. Don't attack aggressively or take a blaming tone. They will tune you out. Try to acknowledge that they want to find a point of agreement between the two of you. 9s will be afraid of your anger and may become stubborn or withdrawn when you begin to show your anger. Assure them that your anger doesn't mean that you don't love them anymore, but that it's important to resolve the issue. 9s are connecting people. It's really important to them that they don't have severed relationships. This is why they work so hard to keep the peace. This is why they overlook a multitude of sins and are highly forgiving. But if you want to get through to your Enneagram type, you're going to have to meet them where they're at so that their defenses don't rise, so that they don't tune out, because they really have a hard time dealing with conflict. So in your communication, if you can do it in a way where you're not blaming and you're not shaming and you're meeting your 9 where you're at, you're going to get so much further communicating with your personality type 9. Well, that's it for conflict styles based on your Enneagram. I hope you enjoyed all the information, and I will see you next week. Listen, if you liked anything that you heard today, make sure that you like and share and subscribe and hit that notification bell right now. Can you hit that bell right now? And make sure that you will not miss another show, and I'll see you again, same time, same place next week.
You know she got you. You'll be the one to come through. If you're lost, she's gonna find you. Find you. She's on her way, on her way, on her way. Reshape.